Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
When I gave a lecture here at the RSA 3 years ago, entitled Out of the Red into the Green, I did so in the confident knowledge that the environment, the value of natural resources, and the realities of climate change were all generally acknowledged, accepted, and endorsed as political imperatives across the spectrum of public discourse. They remain, of course, fundamentally important. Indeed, I would argue they are the most important of all the challenges we face in this generation or the next. But I fear their political salience has waned. And part of my purpose in being here tonight is to shout out as loudly as I can that the environment still matters, that green is as important as growth, and that the two do absolutely walk hand in hand. It should, of course, be axiomatic that the environment matters. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the way we produce our food, the natural resources that continue to be available to us, the waste we generate, the state of our land and landscape. We are, all of us, creatures of place. We have a profound attachment to the space of earth in which we live. Safeguarding the condition of that place, which is the portion of the world we share with our families and neighbours, is something that matters to huge numbers of people. Governments and policymakers have to acknowledge this and respect it. Even if we weren't living through a double-dip recession, we know that in a modern democracy, the way to tackle poverty and disadvantage is to secure steady growth. We also know that without growth, deficits won't reduce and unemployment and distress will continue. There are some in the green movement who argue that growth is an enemy of the environment and sustainable lifestyles, that we should rejoice in economic stagnation or decline because it forces us to recalibrate the way we live and what we aspire to, that husbanding existing resources and standards of living is better than striving for more or better, that contentment comes from an acceptance of what and where we are, and that striving to grow economically brings inevitable environmental deterioration, overuse of natural capital, and mortgages the future too. I don't accept this. Of course I understand that not all growth of all kinds is sustainable. But the imperative we have, especially in these times, is to search for growth that truly is sustainable. And the starting point must be a firm belief that we can't abandon either green or growth. This task is made more challenging, of course, by the reality of climate change. It is unsustainable growth over decades that has brought concentrations of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere that are leading inexorably to a changing climate across the globe. It is now likely that we will face an average global temperature rise of at least 2 degrees in the course of this century. It may well be more, with devastating consequences for weather patterns, temperatures, sea levels, patterns of agriculture, floods, droughts, availability of water, and movements of populations. Here in England, we have just experienced the driest combination of 2 winter periods since 1922. We had the driest March for more than 50 years. But now, almost as if to mock us, we've just lived through the wettest April since records began. And yes, it's absurd. We have hosepipe bans around many parts of the country, and yet it's been bucketing with rain for days. there have been buses emblazoned with posters saying, "We are in drought," splashing their way through huge standing pools of rainwater. There's an important message, though, that hasn't yet emerged from all of this, and that is that this sort of combination of extremes of weather following in such rapid succession is likely to become a more frequent occurrence in future years, as climate change begins to have an effect. We are going to have to get more used to violent changes of weather, to periods when everything dries up and others when everything gets deluged. This is the world we're moving towards. It isn't, though, just that climate change has been struggling a bit more than before to find public acknowledgement. It's that the environment as a whole has slipped down the political and public agenda. This is perhaps inevitable, as the focus everywhere is almost exclusively on economic crisis, on deficit reduction, and on the desperate need for growth. The environment's voice is far less powerful. As a taxi driver said to me the other day, surely we've got more important things to worry about at the moment than the future of the planet. All is not lost, however. The political focus may have turned away for the time being, but the public's commitment to the environment as green space that allows humanity to breathe is as strong as ever. And the number of householders classing themselves as committed recyclers has risen from 45% in 2004 to 70% last year. 74% of adults polled last year by YouGov for the Sunday Times thought the government should use more solar energy. And even in the field of climate change, there are signs that concern is rising again, as the number of people thinking climate change is, quote, a very serious problem, unquote, rose from 43% in 2010 to 49% in 2011. The world of business is already way ahead of us in recognizing this. I can put it no better than the opening words of a recent 2012 report by KPMG International, entitled "Expect the Unexpected: Building Business Value in a Changing World." They say, and I quote, "For 20 years or more, the world has recognized that the way we do business has serious impacts on the world around us. Now it is increasingly clear that the state of the world around us affects the way we do business. The central challenge of our age, decoupling human progress from resource use and environmental decline, can also be one of the biggest sources of future success for business. More corporations are recognizing that there is value and opportunity in a broader sense of responsibility beyond the next quarter's results, that what is good for people and the planet can also be good for the long-term bottom line and shareholder value. The impetus amongst the large retailers here in the UK, for example, to restructure their transport movements, to reduce emissions from their refrigeration units, and to transform the way they deal with waste. The scramble amongst car manufacturers around the world for lower emissions and hybrid varieties and affordable electric vehicles. The way in which large-scale engineering companies are investing hugely in renewable technologies and carbon-reducing equipment. In the US, for example, whilst Congress is totally becalmed on the issue, company after company are simply getting on and doing it. Here in the UK, PepsiCo are encouraging the growers they work with to reduce water use by 50% over 5 years. Marks and Spencer's Plan A, called Plan A because there is no Plan B, targeting more sustainable use of energy, recycling of plastics, and lower carbon emissions, generated £70 million of net benefit for the company in 2011. Being green can indeed be profitable. The two most important influences on corporate environmental practices are creating competitive advantage on the one hand and reducing costs on the other. There are many examples now of companies achieving one or both of these objectives by deciding to do the right green thing. This sea change in the attitudes of major businesses is remarkable and very welcome. In 2010, PricewaterhouseCoopers carried out a survey of senior leaders in major companies across 15 different countries, conducting 700 interviews in total. Their findings showed a substantial degree of consensus across all countries and sectors, a recognition of the challenge posed by climate change, support for a mixture of incentives, carbon taxes, and emissions trading schemes to tackle it, and a desire above all for certainty and consistency in the way governments went about creating the necessary regulatory structures. In the UK, for example, they found amongst the businesses they polled 64% support for a carbon tax and 68% support for emissions trading schemes. Perhaps most interestingly, 53% globally saw environmental regulation as an opportunity for business. Note, regulation and opportunity. This isn't, of course, as counterintuitive as it might appear to those who take a simplistic view that all regulation hinders business opportunity. The reality is that good regulation in the public interest, intelligently administered, creates a level playing field, helps to support the smart and innovative companies, helps to stimulate new ways of doing things, new services and new products, and provides benefits for people, for the environment, and for business. If we can help people and policymakers to understand these interconnections and to cherish them, we can make real progress. We can find ways that solve some problems, though probably not all. We can recognize that green growth is not a contradiction, far from it. And we may be able to make a modest contribution to the future of our planet. Thank you.